She is 14 years old, and that day, they close the door behind her. Fabienne is sent to the Pasteur in Toulouse, an old convent, a closed place, a place meant to put back on the right path the teenage girls considered too dangerous, too free, too disturbing. Inside, they are not called victims, they are called bad girls. Very quickly, Fabienne understands the rule: keep quiet, obey, and accept. Humiliations are daily, so are deprivations, isolation, collective punishments, insults disguised as morality. And above all, this idea hammered in relentlessly: if she is here today, it is entirely her own fault. When she leaves this place, Fabienne has only one certainty: she doesn't deserve anything better. So, when later on she finally thinks she's found love, she doesn't see the danger coming. One night, in a room, the situation gets out of her control. About 10 boys come in and take advantage of her. She doesn't understand what's happening. No one listens to her. No one protects her. When it's all over, she throws them out, as if nothing matters, as if it's normal. For a long time, Fabienne thought that she was the problem, but today, she's here to talk about what many have experienced, without ever being able to say it. She reveals everything she went through. She names names and finally unveils her former life, hidden from everyone's eyes. Welcome to StoryCube.
She left me at the maternity ward. She left. It's a former convent, but there are shards of bottles all around, so the girls can't run away. I went through all kinds of institutional violence, physical abuse, humiliation, mistreatment, and then religious indoctrination. Afterward, we did cleaning chores and worked for the congregation in the afternoon with no school. Soon, other boys joined in, turning it into a group activity. For 2 years, I was treated like an object, and my file labeled me a deviant and vicious girl.
Hello everyone, welcome to StoryCube. Today we're welcoming Fabienne Bichet, who recently wrote a book, Me, Fabienne Bichet, Bad Girl, and today she's here to talk to us about it. We'll cover the main points of her journey. Fabienne, welcome to StoryCube. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
This book was published on October 8th, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it's very recent, exactly.
And what's it about? Basically,
it's about a life journey, about a rough start leading to a very pleasant life after all.
You can find it pretty much everywhere, I think. Or maybe it's everywhere.
It's available at all bookstores, Fnac, Amazon, everywhere.
Incredible. We'll obviously put the link in the first line of the description for those who are interested. Before we get into the heart of the matter, Fabienne, I thought it would be relevant to talk a little bit about the context. Maybe your childhood. How did it all start in the end?
Badly, very badly, okay, very badly. I was born to a mother who didn't want me. That's not a guess. She actually tried to have an abortion twice. She left me at the maternity ward. She left because she was too young, economically weak, a single mother. It wasn't the ideal time for her to have a child, so she left me there. And then I was placed in foster care. Then I was in a nursery once, then another nursery, then a third nursery.
A nursery?
That's where they put the infants. The babies, they place them in families who take in 3 or 4 babies like that as foster care. They didn't keep them long, so families wouldn't get attached. So by the time I was 3, I was in my 5th home. And then my mother reappeared in Jura. She married a man from Jura. The public assistant sent her a letter to tell her either she could take me back or I could be adopted. And her husband decided to adopt me. That's how I became Fabienne.
It's because her husband then was named Bichet.
Maurice Bichet, he was a photographer. And she left again a year later with a baby in her arms and pregnant. She left me there. And the second time, the same thing happened. I think I come from a bad memory, and I stayed there for a few years. It was a farm in the countryside, rather pleasant to live in.
When you say you stayed there, do you mean the husband stayed, or yes?
He stayed. He lived on the farm. He also lived with his father, his mother. He occupied the first floor with the grandmother. It was a farm where everyone worked. On the farm, it was pretty good. If it hadn't been for the grandfather, I was a victim of incest very early. Between 6 and 9 years old, the grandfather would regularly corner me in the barn.
Was the family aware of
all this, right? And then me, I didn't know, I didn't dare to say anything. I was scared, I endured. And then one day my mother showed up again. Well, it's not that she showed up again. She sent 2 men to get me, to take me back. Obviously, the farm didn't want to let me go, so actually they kidnapped me and I ended up in a housing project in Le Mans. It was still very, very different from the farm, the cows.
How does it work when they pick you up at the farm?
They hid me in a closet, they looked for me, they took me away by force. There was a lot of screaming. And then...
Was it the family who was at the farm then? Didn't they try to find you afterwards?
They didn't have the legal means since they were taking me to my birth mother. So she had all the rights.
You arrive there. How old are you when you go back to your mother?
I'm 9, so of course it goes badly. The contrast between the farm, countryside, open spaces, and then the city and apartment building is already harsh. I enter a crowded apartment full of unfamiliar family members.
Why are there 15 in the apartment?
Because they were people who were economically disadvantaged, so everyone lived in the same apartment. My mother lived with her parents, her brothers and sisters, plus her 2 children and me, who was on the way. Also, so the 3 of us slept in the same bed. They were blonde, I was brunette, I was discovering them, I wondered where I was arriving. I think I was an unbearable kid. I made them pay for this move, and it wasn't easy for them either. I must have had antisocial behavior at school, and it was the school that made a report. And the DAS came back to get me because ASE used to be called DAS.
The DAS, what's that?
So, it's child protection then. They came to get me and put me in a facility that was supposed to protect me.
That was around what age, roughly?
So, I was 10 years old, so that's when I went to my first collective boarding school, co-ed. There were boys who were 15 and I was 10. And I was assaulted by a teenager who was starting to have sexual needs.
At 10 years old?
Yes, I was 10 years old and he...
How old was he?
And he was 15 years old. And then there was someone from the cafeteria one day who saw what was happening and made a statement. I was removed, and on my file it was written deviant and vicious girl. And I was expelled.
And you were the one who was expelled?
I was the one who was expelled, not the boy. Yes, this was in 1965-66. And at that time, it was the girls who chased after the boys, not the boys who had urges they couldn't control. I went to a convent school, so the girls were seen as deviant.
When you were expelled from that place, how old were you? I was 10 years old.
Still, it's crazy.
You experience as much in 10 years as someone else does in 30 years. What happens next?
After that, I was placed in another girls' boarding school where I had a bit of peaceful time, and then I was transferred to Pasteur in Toulouse because I still had that label on my file, and that's where the title of my book comes from. Bad girl, me, Fabienne B, bad girl.
Because of that label exactly, that had been...
Put in my file, so it follows me.
So you arrive in this new place. What happens there?
So I arrived there. It's the antechamber of the prison, actually. It's run by nuns. It's the congregation of the Good Shepherd, so... There are high walls with shards of bottles all around. It's an old convent, but there are shards of bottles all around so the girls can't escape. We managed a few times, but when we did, the punishment was extremely severe.
What does it look like inside and how is it organized?
It begins with waking up early. There's no shower, so we wash at the sink with cold water. Then there's a quick breakfast with slices of bread and margarine. Margarine isn't good. Breakfast, and then religious indoctrination. Afterward, we did cleaning chores, then worked for the congregation in the afternoon. I glued boxes for Gervais ice cream. There was no school.
Okay, I was going to ask, so there was never a time when you went to school?
No, there was no schooling. I went in there when I was 14 and I left when I was 18. And in between, I suffered all kinds of institutional violence, physical abuse, humiliation, mistreatment.
Can you share an example, maybe an anecdote you experienced there, or a specific story or name you remember?
There was a time when we decided to run away because life was really hard, unbearable. They kept crushing you, telling you that you were bad girls, that you were lost girls. Most of us had already had some experience with sexuality. We had all been victimized by men before entering the Good Shepherd. And for these nuns, we were tainted, we were lost girls, and only our souls could be saved. And either you fall into depression, or you fight, or you and us with 2 others. We had decided to escape when we managed to escape.
What does it mean to escape?
It means we had hidden blankets in the park to get over the broken glass. We had to find ropes. When you really want to get out of something, you manage to do it. We ran away, there were 3 of us, we made it to Paris. In Paris, we had to eat, so we drew lots to see who would steal something at Monoprix. It was me. I had to take a brioche, a cheese. Well, I don't know, but anyway, I got caught at the exit, stopped by the police. And then I ended up at the holding center in Paris, under the clock platform, where I was in a real prison cell. They kept me there for a week because they needed time to find the other girls, but they never found them.
They didn't find the other girls? It's wild.
No, they saw me leave in a police car with them right in front of Monoprix.
That's for sure, that's certain.
So I spent a week in the holding cells, at the concierge's office, in Paris, and in the holding area. Before me, there was Louis XVI, also in that place. There was Marie Antoinette and many others. When the juvenile judge sent me back to Toulouse there, I was used as an example for all those who might have dared to do the same thing. They made me walk through the dining hall, really crushing me. And then...
What kind of punishment is that? You walk through what? What happens?
I walk through the dining hall with the Mother Superior saying how much I deserve a severe punishment, and then I'm locked up for a month in a solitary cell upstairs.
And during that time, while you're walking through, people, they're watching you.
Obviously, all the girls are looking at me, all the girls are looking at me. I can really feel the girls' compassion. I see the harshness of the nuns, and I know I'm going to have a tough time ahead. It's a moment that really leaves a mark.
Then you stay locked up for a month in
a room where the bed is attached, it's fixed to the floor, where there's a little space for your needs, where there's a hatch to pass the tray through, and there are bars. In the end,
It's a prison. How do you feel when you're there for a month? Do you think about what you've done, or do you just want to get out instantly?
how do you cope when you have no book or distractions, just the ceiling or sky to look at? We're more resilient than we think. Actually, we can withstand a lot of things, especially when we're young. And you know, I used to make up stories, my mind would wander, and time passed until I was released.
What happens when you're released? What happens next?
After that, I rejoined the groups, I rejoined the work groups, the cleaning groups, the workshop groups. There are great moments of solidarity and friendship, but also very violent times, since all the girls there are suffering. So sometimes there are still fights, power struggles. The way to deal with your pain is also sometimes to hit each other. Sometimes we also do stupid things, and that's good too. It feels good. But then it's collective punishment.
What kind of collective punishment is it?
Collective punishment means a beating. Everyone in the dorm, at the foot of the bed in nightgowns, must lift their nightgowns and lie across the bed frame. One sister holds your hands from above, another whips your bare buttocks, and the third watches the dormitory. There are 40 of us in the dormitory. When we all have to go through it, and you're the 10th in line, and you hear all the others crying and screaming before you, it's a difficult moment.
And when was that? I'm telling you.
The 70s in 1970.
Silly question, but that type of election no longer exists today.
No, it was closed anyway.
So I hope you live there. What happens next?
When I turned 18, since I was no longer bringing money to the institution, I was sent away on my 18th birthday. Because the DAS, which is now the ZD, gives a subsidy per girl to the nuns. So the day they no longer receive the subsidy, they kick us out. And since it's a congregation where they live shut away, they don't know either. They don't necessarily know the outside world. Today, in a boarding school, everyone leaves on the same day, except that over there, we left on our birthday when we turned 18. And alone, we knew that these were girls who had been abandoned, who were in those homes. And at the end of the street, there was a cafe, and in that cafe, there were young people who worked for the prostitution network in Toulouse. So I was immediately noticed and followed. Well, when I got out, I told myself I needed to eat. I was in survival mode, so I wandered a lot. I eventually found a small workers' restaurant that agreed to hire me. Except that I had been followed when I left, I had been noticed, then some time passed, and then I met a boy, when you're 15 years old in a dormitory. When you've never been a person, when you've never had any recognition, any value, the first boy who shows you a little interest, who talks to you, you think you're starting a love story and it feels good. But he's not there for a love story and it goes wrong, very wrong.
How does it start? How do you meet?
A boy comes up to me, we talk, there's conversation, flirting. Up to then, it's the usual, building trust, walking in the park, talking, getting to know each other over several days.
He lived nearby, he was from the area.
Yes, they're guys from Toulouse, of course, until the day he wants to sleep with me. I accept, mostly to please him, to keep the tenderness, the affection, and to keep the boy. And then it goes bad, very quickly, very quickly. Other boys come into the room, it's a group thing. Then after that, he disappears, I don't see him anymore.
Wait, what do you mean other boys are coming in?
Yes, I had gone to an apartment with him then, once he had sex with me. Very quickly his friends arrived, they opened the door, his friends arrived. It was a group thing, so I was 18, these were my first sexual experiences. It wasn't starting off well.
But what happens after that? So were you left alone like that in the room?
No, they kicked me out because after that their friends arrived with bottles, with stuff, etc. So they threw me out, they threw my clothes out onto the landing and kicked me out.
And this friend, in quotes, did you see him again after that? No.
I didn't, I saw him again, I ran into him later, and then time went by, I went home, I took a shower, and then after that, I just had to keep living. So I went back to work at another restaurant.
Because at the time I was so shocked that I needed some time, of course, to
Pull myself together.
Did you mention it to anyone or discuss it with people around you at the time?
And I was ashamed. I felt like I had trapped myself, that it was my fault. After all, for 10 years I had been told that everything was my fault, for everything, so I was guilty. Who could I complain to? I was just ashamed, so of course I didn't say anything to anyone.
You also weren't reaching out to your mother then since she abandoned you, or at least that's what I imagine.
I tried reconnecting with my mother, but it didn't go well.
How did it go? What happened?
She wasn't there, it was her husband who was there, and then her husband did it to me too. I grew up in a world where women's bodies were never respected.
When did that happen?
Between 18 and 19 years old.
So you went through all that in just 2 years?
For 2 years, I was treated as an object and sold into prostitution networks. I escaped just as I realized they planned to kill me.
Wait, how does that happen? So does that mean you're trying to make some money and suddenly they end up approaching you? How does that work?
I work as a waitress in restaurants because I don't want to be a prostitute. The only friends I have are either prostitutes or waitresses in restaurants, and I didn't want to be a prostitute. Her sexuality had started off very badly, and I knew that if I became a prostitute, no one would ever love me. And I had a deep need to fix that emotional lack. So I held on to my waitress jobs. As long as I didn't submit, as long as I didn't accept, they couldn't put me out on the street either. Every time I met different guys, each time I thought it was a love story that would continue, that the guys didn't know each other, and then every time it ended in violence, until the moment when they locked me up and sold me for the prostitution market to leave by boat to Tangier.
To see how it works, how things go?
It's simple. They came to get me when I left the restaurant where I worked, telling me they were going to take me home. They forced me into the car. Then afterwards, they locked me in an apartment for a week, probably to arrange my sale.
Do they provide food that week, or how does it work?
Every day, someone comes by, brings me something to eat, and leaves.
Perhaps there was no phone then, so you couldn't contact anyone outside.
They locked me in a public housing apartment with only running water and a mattress on the floor. That was it. We didn't have cell phones.
What happens next? You spend a week on your own.
They came to get me to tell me they were taking me out for lunch, so I was happy to go have lunch. Well, and when I arrived at that apartment, I understood right away. They told me I was leaving for Tangier by boat. When I saw the tickets on the table, I realized I was being sold.
That means they got money for selling you to someone else.
Yes, I was sold. I had been sold. Luckily, at some point, I also had a bit of good luck. I went to the bathroom, and by chance, there was a skylight in the bathroom, so I escaped through the skylight. I went to a squat. I definitely didn't go back to my apartment. I went to an apartment under construction on the other side of the city where I hid for a while.
In the end, they never searched for you.
I'm not sure, but they didn't find me.
It's crazy. I didn't know that existed. They're like networks that kidnap vulnerable girls.
Girls without families, girls who are wandering.
Where was the boat taking you, and what would happen in Tangier? What's happening over there?
That's what they called white slavery. We're in 1974, 1975. That's what they called white slavery. There were girls who disappeared like that, and they were sent by boat, and it was on the construction sites. The girls, they were prostitutes on the workers' sites. I believe when you go there, you don't return because you die there.
So you managed to escape?
I managed to escape.
Fortunately, you lived for a little while in a squat. What happens next?
So I stayed in that squat for a while. There was a market downstairs, so I fed myself with whatever fell from the crates at the market. I stayed hidden in that apartment under construction. And then, at some point, I went to look for a way to find a new job. But in the suburbs of Toulouse, not inside Toulouse.
Okay, so farther away, farther away.
Except that I'm 18 years old, I trust life. I think the danger has passed. And at some point, I go back to live in my studio, where I needed my things.
In your apartment, or rather your studio.
So I'm tracked again, spotted, and...
By the same network?
I'm on the same network, but I don't realize it. Each time I think I'm meeting a boy and starting a love story. Every time I have this illusion because I have such an emotional need that I need it to. And every time it goes wrong. And every time I think it's my fault that I don't know how to judge who's dangerous. For me...
Does that mean he eventually connects you again with another boy who...
Yes, I learned to endure because since I've lived a lot of life, I learned to endure. I learned to dissociate, to have my mind far from my body, for my mind to be in one place and my body in another. That's what allowed me to endure. That's also what could have led me into prostitution because I no longer realized what I was going through. I had given up the fight. And then, one day, I saw one of the residents from Pasteur again. She was dead. I don't think they made me go to that place by accident either. And when you're 18, you think you're immortal.
Do we know how she died or what happened?
Yes, they killed her.
Why?
Maybe she was as strong as I am, I don't know. Before, for me, death was only for old people. At 18, you don't worry about death or think about it until you've witnessed it. Honestly, it doesn't bother you then. Every time I got back up, fixed myself, took a shower and moved on, but this time it shook me a bit. Then one evening, coming home from a restaurant where I worked, my mattress had been slashed open and thrown out the window. But all my records had been broken, my clothes torn, I had nothing left. So that night I told myself either I get killed tonight or I make it through. Actually, I had to accept in my mind that I might die in order to save myself, and I managed to cross the city. I had realized that I no longer belonged to myself, that my body no longer belonged to me. I knew I was in real serious danger, and yet I still managed to save myself. I stuck out my thumb at the entrance to National 20 in Toulouse. The first car that came picked me up, and from that moment on, I became a different girl.
You hitchhiked and left for another city right away?
I was coming to Paris, I hitchhiked to get to Paris, and my luck was that I didn't make it to Paris.
Okay, so where did you end up arriving?
I arrived in Fontainebleau because the last car that picked me up was going to Fontainebleau. He gave me a place to stay, welcomed me, he behaved well. It was the first time I met a normal guy, a good guy, who was working, who didn't need to sleep with me. He gave me the guest room, and I told him what I was running from in Toulouse. He reached out to me, he helped me.
How old was he? He was 40 years old.
But he had recently been left by his girlfriend, who was his age. He was still processing being abandoned. He had no desire at all to jump on a young, rebellious 19-year-old. He treated me well, protected me, and helped me get into nursing school since I wanted to be a nurse. Working as a nursing assistant at the Fontainebleau Hospital began to change my life. After a few months, once I was working, I had a salary. He wanted to start his life over, so he acted as my guarantor so I could get an apartment. He treated me very well. Then very quickly, 2 friends who were at school with me came to share the apartment with me. Then it was a positive, joyful, nice period. And from there, I met some guys, normal guys who were working. The relationships were short because I had too strong of an emotional need. Of course, and the guys didn't handle it well, but still, I was treated normally.
How old were you when you finally started your life? Well, I mean...
I was 20 years old, and so I worked for a while at the hospital. It was joyful in Fontainebleau. It's a good memory. I met a boy whom I fell deeply in love with, well, who didn't want to sleep with me. It was nice. He was gay. He wasn't comfortable with his homosexuality, so it worked out well for him too. Very quickly, we lived together, and it allowed me some time to heal. I had what I needed, affection, sharing a life. I had everything. It wasn't through the body that I was able to heal a bit. And then one day I was replaced by Jean Bernard. Well, yes, inevitably. And then I was jealous. A threesome wasn't my thing, so I went my own way. I left. I came to Paris.
Okay, and how did you progress there?
I arrived in Paris. A friend had told me to come work as a hostess with her. It was at Maserati, the car company. So I worked as a hostess once, twice, 3 times. And then after that, the person in charge of organizing events, who was Michel Beltoise, brother of Jean-Pierre Beltoise, the famous race car driver from those years, Formula 1 racing. And he believed in me, he valued me, he was the first person. Well, at the hospital things were going well, but there he believed in me, he valued me. He was convinced that I was capable of many things. And from that moment on, I turned all my past experiences, everything I had lived through before, into resources. That means I had developed an extreme vigilance. Because every time I fell into traps, I ended up with boys who hurt me, and I thought it was my fault. So I had developed this hypervigilance to know if someone was dangerous for me or not. I had developed hyperactivity, because being hyperactive...
It lets you forget or stop thinking.
It allows you to forget, not to think. I knew that I knew nothing. So I had learned to read a lot. There was one of the waitresses who told me about TED, correspondence courses, so I took all the French classes, the spelling classes. With the bled, I had the Lagarde's Michart. I had bought the Lagarde's de Michart, which were expensive, but with my waitress salary, I can tell you it's expensive, the Lagarde's de Michart. And then, from all the excerpts, I bought all the books. I read a lot, because since I was shouting, I thought I was missing the verb, and it was because I was missing the verb. That I only associated with the dregs of society. I quickly thought that the power of words was the first power above all others. That was the first step that allowed me social censorship. The power of words, the first power. It allows you not to let others tell your life story for you. It allows you to be convincing. It allows you to bring people together around you. It allows you to say things with precision. And when you scream, it's a language that no one wants to understand. No one wants to hear when you scream. And I used to scream a lot when I was suffering. This belief that words would save me did save me. Maybe also if I met the boy in Fontainebleau, it's because I had already acquired the vocabulary of people from good society. When I was admitted to the hospital, they assumed I had a certain education. Admission required a high school diploma, as it still does. That diploma was my first step up the social ladder. The first was acquiring language. The second was that people trusted me, because to deserve that trust, I was capable of anything. Since I hadn't had any education, I didn't have any limits either. I didn't know where the limits were. And that turned out to be a tremendous asset. Once I became a professional, do you have a memory like that of moments when you surpassed yourself for, yes, but even further? Afterwards, I worked on all the Formula One races. I met all the champions from those years. Yes, I discovered what precision of movement was, what self-control was, logistical organization with incredible precision. Because during the races, between the electricians, the mechanics, all those people, that's where it is. Everyone has an extremely precise task, and all of that comes together wonderfully. I discovered the world of adrenaline, the world of sports. Those were intense experiences. As head hostess, I was responsible for recruiting all hostesses. Michel Beltoise trusted my ability. He'd send me to a city needing 20 hostesses by the next day, and I'd always find them. The street became my playground.
For those who don't know, the hostesses.
They were reception hostesses, to distribute all the sponsored products, to welcome the guests, greet them, serve champagne, serve drinks, serve cocktails. It was all those things.
That's it, and you usually find them, so...
How did you? The street was my playground when I was in Toulouse, when I was in that survival period, in that wandering period. I never had anyone to introduce me to anyone. I've always managed on my own, so I have this empathetic ability to reach out to others. It's easy for me.
And so you grow like that. It's when you follow it, you end up meeting someone too, by the way, at some point, or maybe not necessarily.
Well, the big encounter was a professional one. It was Michel Beltoise who trusted me, and to deserve that trust, I was capable of all kinds of miracles. And then, since I wasn't making enough money by having the hostesses work and by working as a hostess myself, I remembered that I had once seen a film shoot when I was working at the hospital. I saw a shoot at the castle, a period film that had come into the park. I had chatted a bit with some extras, but for me, my calling was to be a nurse, so I saw that shoot, and that was it. A few years later, I thought it could be a good way to give the hostesses some work so that they too could wear pretty dresses like in the period film, and I went door to door to the production companies. At that time, it was the early 1980s. There were no entry codes on the doors. When you wanted to meet someone, you just met them. There was still no internet. No one told you to send an email and then never replied. It was simple. If you wanted to meet someone, you just did.
You went.
And that's how I started the first film, obviously. My hostess file, they didn't want it, they didn't care at all, they were looking for children. I put away my hostess file and I did the school pickups. At first, they only gave me a set or a task to find something specific that no one else could find, that no one knew how to look for, and I found what no one else knew how to look for. Because the street was my playground, because I had no limits. You asked me for an anecdote earlier. Well, for example, when I was working on The Outsider with Jean-Paul Belmondo, already working with Jean-Paul Belmondo to find extras, that's easy. Everyone wants to meet Jean-Paul Belmondo, so for The Outsider, I had to create a leather nightclub with gay men in leather. But where do you find them? Where do they go out? So I dressed up as a boy, and I went with a gay friend to Le Dépôt, which was a gay nightclub. It was pretty wild, with back rooms downstairs. Anyway, I did see some things there, and I was dressed up as a boy. I let my friend do the talking at the entrance to the security guard so that no one would pay attention to me. With a beanie on my head and a leather jacket, I was basically a boy, you know? Except that, well, after a while I started making friends with the guys inside the nightclub and I was slipping phone numbers into my pocket. I still ended up being identified by the security guards who were wondering what I was doing there, what I was up to, and then I got thrown out onto the sidewalk like an old piece of trash. But after so much humiliation in Toulouse, honestly, it didn't even faze me. I got back up, I had some phone numbers in my pocket, that's it.
That's it.
The first 10 brought me the other 30.
So you finally signed up your network at that point too?
I quickly built a reputation for myself as someone who could find the impossible. Very quickly I started working on big sets, and that's where, once again, I turned my weaknesses into strengths. I had hyperactivity, and luckily I had that hyperactivity because I didn't know how to work, so I didn't know how to organize myself. I needed to work 15 hours a day to deserve the trust people had in me, that's it. Plus, I was getting paid anyway, so I had to deliver, and besides, I had lied. I always insisted people should believe in my abilities.
Yes, even though sometimes you weren't sure?
Yes, the imposter syndrome, I mean, I had it for a very, very, very long time.
That's it. When discussing sets, it's like a movie scene with extras in the background. We call that a set, right? Yes, that's it.
It's the movie scene. Filming in a working-class restaurant isn't the same as filming in an upscale one. It's not the same thing if you're filming in a restaurant in the 16th district or if you're filming in a neighborhood restaurant. It's the extras who give the spirit and the color to the set. I don't choose the same extras for one set or the other.
Okay, so what happened after that, leading up to today?
I spent 10 years casting extras because it really takes that long to be legitimate and to feel legitimate as well. And during that time, I was learning. I went to the movies a lot. I went to the theater a lot. I was building relationships with actors on set so that I could eventually move on to casting actors. And then there was Canal, plus Antoine de Caunes told me, we're a young company. We're just starting out. Do you want to come with us? And it was Canal Plus. And there, I experienced all the great years of Canal Plus. There, I was finding the Miss Metropole contestants, the columnists, the actors. Very quickly, as for the extras, it was my assistants. I had assistants who took care of finding the extras. And there you go, I was part of all the great years of Canal Plus. And then I continued working in cinema. I also worked on major films for the cinema.
Today, what are you?
I've been working in cinema for 30 years now, and I've made more than 60 films, including some major ones. I've worked with Roman Polanski, with Philippe Harel, Philippe Lioré, and I've done 2 James Bond movies. I've really made a lot of films. French films, foreign films, Italian films. And 10 years ago, I wanted to start passing on my knowledge, to begin teaching. Because what was also happening, as I became more well-known, I was invited to film festivals to present awards to actors. And that's when my past caught up with me, Jay, caught up with my past. Because during all my years at Bon Pasteur, when I was told to keep quiet, when I tried to be as discreet as possible, when I felt I had no value, when I tried to disappear, and when you're asked to keep quiet throughout your youth, then suddenly you're on a stage with spotlights, a microphone, and 300 people waiting for you to be smart. My mind went blank. I lost my composure. It was awful. The first time not a sound came out. Someone had to rescue me and take the microphone. But at the same time, if you don't try, you'll never know how to do it. If you don't do it, you'll never know how. So you just have to go back and try again. So I went back, and then went back 10 more times after that. I would study in my hotel. I would memorize the actor's resume by heart, so I could introduce him properly before giving him his award. Once on stage, I only had 3 poor sentences left. That's all I had learned. And to go back and forth. Then I heard about a public speaking training, so I went to take that course. I thought it was great, and from then on I read every book I could find about public speaking. Honestly, books really contributed a lot to my progress. And when I learned that, I thought to myself, if only I had learned this when I was younger. So I wanted to share it and also to keep learning. So I offered my services at a university at the Catholic Institute of Paris, where I teach undergraduate students in information and communication. I also do this in business classes, so I go there once a week. A decade ago, I wanted to share knowledge and develop my skills, and I still do today.
So you also wrote a book, Me, Fabienne B, Bad Girl. For those who may not have caught it at the beginning of the video, what is this book about? It goes back over your journey, right?
It traces my entire journey, from me, the bad girl, locked up, to me under the spotlight and invited to a podcast show. It traces my whole journey. But it's not a book about pain, it's a book about the strength to get back up. I wrote this book because it's a message of hope. If you think you have no worth, remember that someone else's opinion doesn't define your value. For everyone who thinks it's over for them, that they started off badly, but starting off badly doesn't mean you'll end up badly too. I want to give hope and courage through my experience and my journey as a mother who wanted to have an abortion. Repeated foster placements, juvenile detention, reform school. Finally rebuilding. Because thanks to people who reached out to me, the hands that I took. Because very often too, when you've been betrayed all the time, you don't trust anyone anymore. Sometimes people asked me why I didn't file a complaint during all that time I was being assaulted, but I wasn't going to file a complaint. I believed I was guilty and responsible for putting myself in that situation. Telling yourself you're guilty is harmful. But at the same time, it's because I was convinced that I was guilty, that they had managed to convince me I was guilty, that I was able to find the strength to get out of it. If they had told me I was a victim, I would have waited for others to get me out of my situations. But since I thought it came from me, I had to find the strength to change my situation myself. And that's where the importance of reading comes in. It was through books that I knew there was another world that existed besides the one I was trapped in. Definitely that part of me that refused to fade away.
Fabienne, thank you. For anyone interested in your book or learning more, I'll place the link at the top of the description. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Did I cover everything you wanted to discuss? One last thing, I noticed you had a note earlier.
Yes, I wrote a little text especially for our show.
With pleasure, with pleasure.
What I would have needed is for people to see me not as a case file, a problem girl, a school failure to be brought back in line, but as a child who is angry, in distress, crying out that she's not okay. I would have needed an adult who doesn't leave, who doesn't betray, someone who stays, even when I scream, even when I slam the door, even when I want to ruin everything. I would have needed a place where I felt safe. Not a locked up place, but somewhere I could breathe, cry, talk, or be silent without being afraid. I was afraid too often for too long. I would have needed someone to tell me one day that I have value, not for what I do, but for who I am. I would have needed to be recognized, to be listened to be held. I think that's what would have allowed me to believe in something within myself. Maybe?
Fabienne, thank you very much. Sadly, that's the end of this episode. If you'd like to watch more, I'll put 2 episodes on the screen. Have a great evening, Fabienne. Thank you.
Thank you again, Noah. Bye.